speakers and over 40,000 participants. Do business at AIHS 2021.
But before we introduce those online, let's invite some of the other speakers that are here with us this afternoon. To join us on this discussion, we have the Managing Director of the Shelter Afrique, Kenya, Mr. Andrew.
Register now to experience a difference at www.ihsabuja.com.
We also have with us here the Managing Director of Bank of Industry. Of the Federal Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Ibrahim Umar Azhar. Let's put our hands together for him and his online for this special presentation this afternoon. We have
This show has been amazing. I would say that I've actually learned a lot and networked with a whole lot of real estate developers out there. So it's been insightful so far. Like, I'm really overwhelmed. Really overwhelmed. I've learned a lot.
We must thank Abuja Housing Show for giving us this opportunity and pleased to interact with the people in the audience here. They are showing a lot of interest and curiosity. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
I am so particularly impressed by the content of delivery. First and foremost, the awareness, the publicity. Prior to this time, I have 3-4 partners who have called me to remind me that they have seen adverts of Abuja International Show on television, on news media. Am I going to be here? I was really amazed that if people are not in the sector are so aware of this, then the organizers of the same must have done a lot to get people's attention, and that's quite a commendable feat.
Abuja Housing Show is a very productive event. You come around here to meet over 50,000 persons. It's been very productive. I mean, since we started coming here, it's been a greater brand awareness, and you meet the corporate world, you meet the public, you meet the masses, and then you do business in a great way and in a special way. I think that's part of the reason why we're here.
Very impressive, absolutely impressive. Every year, this exhibition keep growing bigger. Greater attendance, global attendance, and this is an improvement of the very excellent one we had last year also.
It's very amazing. Amazing experience so far. The turnout has been good. We've been meeting a lot of
we've seen significant shocks which COVID-19 has caused. Before COVID-19, housing finance faced significant challenges, both at the construction finance end and at the end, what we call the retail finance end. And now, with COVID-19, with significant risks, which we now see in the whole ecosystem, lenders are a lot more wary. Lenders look at your capital stack much with greater scrutiny. And the level of attention paid to the issue of risk management by lenders is a lot more detailed than it has ever been. But we cannot fold our arms. What I have personally seen is that in spite of all the challenges, players in this industry across the value chain, they have risen to the occasion. And we've seen a lot of resilience. We've seen a lot of innovation that have been introduced in order to deal with the challenges headlong. And there are lessons which I believe our speakers will be sharing with us today. And I'm very pleased that the lead presenter for this session is Maria. Maria is the international director of the Housing Finance Program of Wharton Business School. I was just sharing with Prof. Anjide a few minutes ago that I just completed that program about 2 months ago. So Maria was my lecturer throughout the program. Was the lecturer. I think it took about 5 or 6 sessions in the course of the program. And so I know that with somebody of that pedigree, we are in on a very good ride in terms of sharing lessons from various emerging countries. Of course, we also have Keshia Rust. Keshia has been here several times. I believe before the last edition of this program, before the COVID-19, we both sat down here and we were on the same panel here. And she will be speaking to us from South Africa. And with all the researches that the center that she runs, they've been doing on housing finance across Africa, I believe that she also has great depth to share with us today. And of course, I have the other panelists who are also here, who have been introduced. So of course we know our time is fast spent. We still have 2 sessions after this, but because we have the privilege of holding the microphone now, we'll do our session. And I know that Prof is looking at me that what is Kim saying? But we'll do our session and then we'll see what happens. But we're going to be very, very brief. We'll take the first paper. We'll take Keshia's paper. I understand that 1 or 2 people here also have presentations to make. We'll take them as well. But we're going to ensure that we have enough time for discussion because that's why we're here. I want to especially welcome the guys who are here with me. Andrew is a great supporter from Shelter Africa. You're welcome. Of course, Ifi, CEO Lexon Capital, Ogo Ifeoma Akabogo from Bank of Industry, representing the MD FCT, and our brother Ibrahim, who has also been ably introduced before we kicked off. So I don't know whether Maria is ready to do the lead presentation. Okay. Can you put Maria on now? Okay. Maria, if you're seeing me, this is Akim, one of your students like 2 months ago on the International Housing Finance Program. But today I'm the chairman of this session. I'm your chairman on this session. So there's some role reversal, Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Maria to make the lead presentation for this session. And let's welcome her with a loud applause. Over to you, Maria.
guys have introduced them.
My core messages are twofold. First of all, I want to reiterate again that the housing sector is such an important part of the economy and an employment generator, so that it is very important to include the housing sector in a stimulus program for the economy, for economies all across the world, but particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, have suffered deeply. So the housing sector can indeed play an important role. So I want to share some of the figures to reiterate the importance of doing so. The second part of the second message that I want to convey is that because of the fiscal challenges that most countries face in the future, that the private sector plays an enormously important role in the stimulus package for the housing sector. But that can only happen if the private sector is indeed having the right incentives. Both the lenders as well as the developers have to get the right incentives, and I want to talk briefly about that. So those are the two core messages, and I will give some examples of why stimulus programs are going wrong in many countries and how we can design them better. So that's in a nutshell, and I will be as concise as you are showing. Are my slides up? No? Because I have several numerical slides. If we don't show the slides, then you will get them later. I know Festus has promised that they will be made available. But let me then speak to the numbers that I was giving in my slides. Housing is indeed an enormous part of GDP of an economy. And I have a slide showing for the United States, for instance, of the housing sector to the GDP of a country is split up. It is a large component of it is through consumption, the services that are provided by the housing sector, the rent that people pay, the implicit rent that owner-occupants should pay where they renting their house. That's a large component, and in the United States, that makes up 15% roughly of the GDP of a country. So by investing in improvement of the housing stock and generating rental income, that part of consumption, as we call it, is going way into the future and is very important for the GDP of a country. The other component of the GDP through the housing sector is, of course, investment. And the investment that everyone because of the data that we have, is in the order of 19% of GDP. That is far larger than the manufacturing sector. And that is often not well understood, not even in the Ministry of Finance and central bankers. So when we now have look at these figures for emerging markets, which are not so readily available, I look at a study that was recently done by Habitat for Humanity to market countries by the housing sector. And we found very similar figures, but a lot of omission. And the omissions were particularly challenging because so much of the housing sector is built informally and is consumed in the informal sector. We did an effort to include informal housing and also housing consumption by homeowners in the figures for emerging market countries. And we found roughly that the housing sector contributed in important markets like Brazil, Egypt, India, the Philippines, South Africa. We had a cluster of 11 countries, and that the contribution to the GDP of a country include the informal lot of employment, not just for construction alone, but we call it the multiplier effect, which you are all familiar with, I'm sure, that the housing sector generates on average more than 2 jobs in other sectors, apart from the housing sector in a narrow vein. So both contribution to GDP and the employment generation, particularly for unskilled labor, which is critically. So if you can have a sector that generates employment opportunities for unskilled labor and fairly good at fairly good wages, because the construction sector on average pays higher wages relative to education levels than most other sectors. So the housing sector is therefore of critical importance to include in a stimulus program. So that is the first part, and I have all of this in my slides that you will be given. All the data of the different countries are there. So that's the for the moment, not enough, but many countries have stimulus programs focused on the housing sector. But the way these stimulus packages look are mostly focused on interest rate subsidies for that part of the mortgage market that is really only servicing the top part of the housing market. And it doesn't really go beyond that top part. But the problem is that that component of the market is already very well supplied. So you do not get the benefits of investing in opening new markets that can go to a much larger scale than only the top part of the market. It often creates, therefore, vacancies when you only focus on the already well-functioning part of the housing market. When you focus the stimulus on that top part of the market, you see vacancies created because that stock cannot be absorbed by people that want to live in the stock, only by investors. And that is not a good use stimulus funds. So that oversupply also has a danger for the financial markets, because if housing lenders invest in housing, the loans for that sector are often increasing, or it is often frowned upon by central banks, and for the right reasons. If we have lower income, informal sector, component of the housing market, we do not run those risks because there the demand for housing is enormous, and with some stimulus or by way of subsidies, we can open up that market, and there people will actually occupy those houses. So it's very important not to focus the narrow stimulus only on the top of the markets and only focus on interest rate subsidies or others. What is often going wrong in countries in the stimulus packages for housing is that policymakers think if we have an interest rate subsidy, we stimulate housing finance, that things will go automatically, well, and that the supply will materialize automatically. And not enough attention is paid to the supply side constraints that developers face, or that the lenders face when they have to open up new markets. So those are the lessons from many stimulus programs in important countries that we have learned from, not just for this crisis, but also for the previous global housing finance crisis that we had in 2009 and 10. Brazil had a large stimulus program focused on housing, but often on the supply side there was not enough support for developers to build in the right location. And we now see after an issue. So that when we look at the finance sector, we need a combination of measures. We need measures to bring down the mortgage market with the right incentives for lenders to go and include informal workers. And I know, for instance, Nigeria has made enormous strides in that area, but that needs to be enlarged so that the informal economy can also participate in the stimulus programs. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the non-mortgage sector, the sector that indeed is very important for the informal economy, smaller loans, not securitized by or not secured by a loan, by lien, that sector, the microfinance loans, the consumer loans for housing, is brought to scale. So we need in the finance sector to have two components to the stimulus, bringing the mortgage market down market and scaling up the microfinance market. Very important that these two components are provided for. So when we rethink the housing stimulus packages, it is with great emphasis that we have to give, in fact, to the incentive system that different lenders have to do precisely that, scale up the mortgage sector particularly. Are the risks that lenders face that need to be addressed in a stimulus package? It is mostly two risks that they actually have the space as private lenders to develop the mortgage sector, and that they are not priced out as in several countries that have an advantage over the private sector. So we must create a level playing field for the public and the private sector lenders so that the private sector lenders can actually come into this market. The second most important risk that needs to be alleviated for lenders is the credit risk. When they go to open up new markets, the lenders want to make sure that someone shares the credit risk that they run. Without any provision for sharing credit risk with the lenders, often the stimulus packages in the housing book are not going to any scale. They remain very, very small and very disappointing. So how is that credit risk shared? Is there a guarantee by the government for the top part of the loan to be guaranteed? Can there be a mortgage insurance developed? Those type of questions are the most important for lenders. Also, how is the funding side organized? Are the transaction costs and the taxation costs forbiddingly high? And are we focusing on housing finance, but not enough on reducing the actual transaction cost in that market, which really be a big cost saving if it could be addressed, and it would eliminate the need for deep subsidies. So those are very important issues on the lender side that need to be addressed. And when they are not, we have seen, like in the case of several countries that I'm actually, because housing finance is not made available in enough scale to stimulate developers to come into the market. And developers only come into the market if there is housing finance available. If there is no housing finance so that people can pay upfront for a developer-built house, the developer sector income market. The third component is the developer, the supply market itself. So are there sufficient incentives for suppliers to come into the market, even if we have access to housing finance? And in many countries, the stimulus package does not, indeed, as I mentioned in the case of Brazil, focus enough attention on the supply side. Is there a service blend? Is there enough residential infrastructure so that developers do not have to provide trunk infrastructure? Are the building and planning requirements suitable for that lower middle income market that is the best market in each country? Or are they out of sync? Are the prices therefore unaffordable for the majority? Are the permitting systems in local governments fast? Or do developers have to wait for a year or two even before they can actually begin to build? The still is affordable housing. And lastly, but very importantly, is there developer finance available, project finance available for the developers so that they can finance their projects without this costing very much, so that that is incorporated in house prices and make them affordable, and make them inaffordable. So all of those issues have to be part and parcel of a good stimulus package. If one is left out, you often see that these stimulus packages are really behaving in a way that are very disappointing and really do not generate the economic growth in the economy that we all would have hoped for. So I know my other panelists will pick up on many of these themes, so I will stop my remarks here. I want to thank you all, and I want to end by making a plug for the Sub-Saharan Africa Housing Finance Training Program, Diversity in October, where many of these issues are really discussed in great detail on how to make the housing finance sector, but also the supply side of the market, move to scale in emerging market countries. Thank you very much.
quick summary before we go to the next presentation. She emphasized the importance of housing, as we all know, as a critical facilitator of economic recovery. So in a post-COVID era, housing is one area that if government focuses on, government can easily tackle the issue of employment generation, infrastructural development, and of course, overcoming social problems. And then two critical points which she made, which I think are the areas of lessons that we need to focus on, is the fact that stimulus is a key program to drive economic recovery. And she emphasized the fact that it works both on the supply side and on the demand side. On the supply side, we have to incentivize providers of mortgage and also create a scale up if you don't have a microfinance market. And on the supply side also, you have to create stimulus to help developers drive delivery in a manner that will help the government agenda in that respect. Thank you very much, Maria. And I hope you are still online, because some of our participants, they might still have one or two questions for you when we go through the other panelists now. I'm now going to ask us to put on Keshia Rust for her presentation. I'll put on Keshia Rust now for her presentation. I know that Keshia has a way of delivering very brief presentations, you know. Okay, so just let's welcome Keshia with an applause. Good to see you again, Keshia. Good to see you again. Well done.
Good afternoon, everybody. What a great honor to join you all here today. And I am so impressed that in the current context, as we are lurching in and out of our pandemic, surviving in a new reality, that Festus and his team has managed to put together a hybrid event like this. I am really impressed and delighted to be with you today. I've been thinking about this topic, as I'm sure everybody has. What are the finance implications of this new reality that we're living in? And I think that the things that Maria has raised are so critical, and all the more so, of course, in this environment, because our economies and our built environments and our families and one another have just suffered. And housing can make a really big difference to all of those levels. And so that's really what we're here to talk about. I'm going to just address quite quickly. I recognize that we've got a time constraint. I've got three broad points that I want to make. Really, first to look at the overall status, and that briefly. And then to note that there are new niche markets that have become more visible. They've actually been there for a long time, but now we have the opportunity that finance can actually see them. And then what is the response that finance needs to make, given that those exist? So broadly, our current context, we've heard that described by so many people in so many different forums across this continent and globally. There's the obvious stress on household income, and that has put pressure on everyone's businesses in this sector, and critically on households themselves and their ability to actually meet their housing needs with the resources they have. That's put further pressure onto municipalities, states, and national governments, both in terms of the resources they have to make the investments that they make, because they're collecting less revenue, and also that the things that they need to do with that less revenue is so much more. They have to meet so many more needs, and there have been new expenses that have come into their plans in the past year and a half. And all of this has put pressure onto the private sector, and the private sector having to deal with a constrained consumer base, and then also constrained themselves in terms of their own. Everyone has had to reconsider their priorities. And in housing terms, I think the bottom line for everyone is that the imperative is that we have to do so much more and with so much less. I've said before that COVID-19 didn't really reveal anything new in housing terms. We've had these challenges forever. But what we understand right now is that that's not going to go away and that we need to revise our systems to accommodate that reality. And that has an impact both on housing form and delivery type, as well as on the way in which we engage with people's own resources and their income. Housing inadequacy is something that's existed across this continent for as long as we've been talking about it. That's not new. But if we can get particular about the inadequacy, what specific inadequacy needs attention? And then housing risks, whether it's structural risks or contractual risks or even environmental risks and now health risks. How do we actually use housing as a way to help mediate and manage the risks that households face? So as we think about all of these things, I think what's come across is some niche markets that deserve particular attention. And in terms of the focus of this panel discussion, what is the role of finance in engaging with those niche markets? So on the demand side, I think one thing that's become quite clear, and I wonder if I can try and share, I'm going to do this. I'm going to share my screen, just one thing that we've just launched. We've just launched about population, and so much of development institutions' work is focused on that. So our B40 dashboard, which I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the address is up here. Please go and take a look at it. And I've just pulled up one screen of that here, where what I'm doing is I'm comparing by wealth segments the issue of inadequate dwellings in Nigeria as a country. And this is data that's drawn from the Demographic and Health Survey data, which is it's a global survey that's done across the world in different countries in different years and funded by USAID. And for Nigeria, the data is from 2018, so it's not that old, which is quite nice. And what we've done is we've taken the data and we've segmented it into the bottom 40th percentile, the middle 40th percentile, the top 20th percentile, 20%, and then the total market. And here I'm looking at inadequate dwellings. And we can see that if you just look at this bottom row here, the percent of dwellings that are visibly in need of investment, which means that they are either they're constructed from not formal materials, or they're overcrowded, or the sanitation is poor. Well, 99% of households living in the bottom 40th percentile in Nigeria have houses that are visibly in need of investment. They're in a house, but that house needs to be fixed. 81% of those in the middle 40th percentile, 52% of those in the top 20% of the Nigerian population. If we then skip to urban areas, it's a little in the bottom 40th percentile, 73% in the middle, and 38%. And if we then look just at Lagos, what this is saying, and I'm not going to go into any more detail with this dashboard here, it's too complicated for this forum, I think. But I welcome you to please explore it. There is not only existing new build. New build is something that we must focus on. But in addition to that, there are households who are living in structures that need improvement and not necessarily a whole new house. And if that is also addressed at the same time, the opportunity to use that effort to also support economic growth is quite significant. But that requires particular products to be developed. And that, I think, is an opportunity looking forward. On the supply side, we think about who are the suppliers and how can we work with them so that they're able to deliver as we require. And we often very quickly go to the large-scale suppliers with an expectation of a large-scale project. And that indeed is really important. But there are smaller-scale suppliers that have different needs. And the financial products that are developed to support the supply side need to recognize the particular needs of smaller suppliers. In addition to that, in many countries...
Recording in progress.
In many countries, employers as well, an important segment of the market and an opportunity to provide supply within employee groups. But then to start thinking about micro builders who are building 1, 2, 3 units at a time, possibly in backyards. Sometimes the other niche market there would be household landlords. We have multiple housing forms that we can think about, not only just the freestanding dwelling, but also there might be a dwelling in a backyard or a inner city existing buildings. There are so many inner city buildings that can be usefully converted or refurbished to good quality rental accommodation. Employer compounds that may have fallen into disrepair that can be improved upon. And the opportunity for investment in that could improve households' current living conditions to a sense where the kinds of risks that come about by a health pandemic or by an environmental pandemic may be addressed in a lead. We need data, and we need to really understand the nuance on the demand side and the nuance on the supply side. And we've been doing some work and are delighted with the work of the National Estate Data Collation Management Program. Very impressed by that effort, and also the work of the Nigeria Mortgage Finance Company. Excited about the efforts for data collection. We've worked with both with the public sector but also in the private sector. So looking forward in terms of what finance needs to do, some new niche markets on the demand side, to develop financial products that respond to the in-situ housing investment needs, and to align with specific needs relating to building access to services, maybe off-grid environmental products to deal with overcrowding. We need incomes that just don't look what a normal product would expect. And then, as Maria said as well, we need low-value products that work with the affordability capacity of a low-income population. And that might well be non-mortgage products. Housing microfinance is critically needed. But even along the whole scale, from microfinance through to micro-mortgages as they might be applied, and that requires more efficient systems and processes. On the supply side, I think it's worth starting to develop products or thinking about the role of SME loans for housing purposes, a small micro-enterprise loan that would go to a household to enable them to play a micro-builder or as a backyard lender. And think about housing loans that are also business loans, but for small-scale players. Action loans for urban infill, and then, of course, the underwriting and servicing for new businesses and businesses that are just entering into the market right now. And all of this, of course, requires the data. And so I would challenge the financial sector, while they're thinking about good products and services to deal with these niche markets, to also collect their own data and collect it in very fine categories so that they can evaluate loan performance and investment performance and develop true risk-based pricing that really makes it possible for these loans to flow further. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
We can see some commonality in the two presentations, which is the fact that we need to focus on the entire housing ecosystem. We need to focus not just on the demand side, but also on the supply side. Because a lot of the times, when we speak about housing finance, we tend to focus more on the end user financing which is what we've done, in trying to implement the national housing policy in Nigeria. We've focused a lot more on the retail finance element of the national housing policy. Whereas if you look at that policy, it stands on a tripod. One of the critical elements of the tripod is how to deal with the issue of supply. But what I've also learned from the two presentations is the fact that a lot of the time we just think too big, but you'll see that both Maria and Kesha, they've emphasized the need to also look micro, to look at small lenders, to look at small players, and see how we can also activate that element of the market. It's very critical. So it's not just looking at those who would deliver 1,000, 2,000 houses, because if you have 100 micro players who deliver 5 houses, you already have 500 houses, which I think is the new thinking, which is happening post the pandemic. I think the panel, we can move back to the stage now, so that we'll, okay, and I think this is working. Thank you very much, my panelists. Sorry for carrying you all over the place, but we need to take our positions. We're going to have to move at jet speed now. Okay, all right. So since women appear to have taken over, we've listened to 2 women. It's just right that we also listen to a man next. So we're going to take Andrew's presentation now. Andrew, 5 minutes. Otherwise, I cut off your mic. Then we'll take Ife, also 5 minutes, and then we'll take it up from there. I'm sure we know Andrew Shiponda is the MD of Shelter Afrique, all the way from Kenya. Thank
you. Thank you very much, Hakim. Yes, I have a very short presentation, just to observe previous protocols, and also just to thank the gentleman over there who clapped first. I think we will have a partnership with Sam. I think that will be quite agreeable. So I had a short presentation, and I'm looking at Elizabeth and saying, what's happening with the presentation? Is it coming up? Okay. Right, so, yeah, so I got 5 minutes. So I'll try to do a bit of justice and focus on the key areas. Now, I don't know how to move the slides so that we move quickly. Is there something which we can use just to move the slides? If not, okay, it's going to be interesting. Okay, so we basically, Shelter Afrique, want to just go into what we believe is the approach in terms of housing post the pandemic. Okay, that's me there. Hakim introduced me. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's move to the next slide. Thank you. These things will be available. Thank you. Let's move to the next slide, which is what we're going to be covering. So I guess for us, what is important in terms of the key facts and figures from the continent is the projection of the Africa's urban residents to 1.5 billion by 2050. And I think more importantly, the movement in terms of the sub-Saharan Africa of 60% urban population. Why is this important to Shelter Afrique? Is because we operate in 44 countries in Africa, of course Nigeria being the most strategic, most important market. That's why we're in Nigeria to look for projects to fund that are focusing on low-cost housing, and also tier 1, tier 2 banks to provide lines of credit to be able to issue mortgage loans. So if we can move on. Oh, nice. We moved to the next one. Okay. So these are just facts just for your information in terms of Nigeria, the impact of COVID. I think you know we've suffered here in Nigeria the worst recession in 25 years. The GDP has contracted, but that's across the board. McKinsey estimate there to be a loss of about 200 billion. But I think let's move the slides further so that we can focus on the key areas. This is also covering the role of human settlements in enhancing social and economic development in Africa. So here you find that the contribution of construction and rental to economies across the board is about 14%. In fact, I asked our Dr. Gambo, who heads up our Center of Excellence, to look at just mortgage penetration in Nigeria. You find that it's at about 1% of GDP, which goes to show that there's a lot of potential to provide access to affordable financing. So according to the figures indicated in Nigeria, the industry contributes 7% of course, GDP, which this can be further improved through enhanced development in the housing finance market. We've also talked about the negative impact of COVID-19 in terms of the contraction in GDP to 1.4%. But however, we believe as Shelter Afrique that there are opportunities that exist, and we would like to be partners with not only the Development Association REDAN, but we also want to be partnerships with all organizations that are key stakeholders in housing. Sam here is looking at innovative houses. You told me one is for $2,500. I'll be very interested in financing that. Family Homes Fund, all the key stakeholders within the Nigerian market. We've looked at the strategies Nigeria has deployed in addressing the sustainable, addressing the COVID-19 recovery. Maybe we can remove the slides so that, that's it. So of course we've noted with interest the 5.9 billion Nigerian economic sustainability strategy investment by the government. We noticed that the strategy costs 1% of the GDP, which is about $500 billion, in dollar terms. And then, of course, the recovery plan includes investment in clean energy, agriculture, and infrastructure. Let's move ahead. Maybe, okay, let's keep moving. Okay, these are just stats. Okay, now we've moved very fast, but it's okay. It's okay. Maybe when I do this, I scratch my nose, you move the slide. How's that? Okay, so I'll just scratch my nose. Okay, so the key thing for us as Shelter Afrique is that, we've been providing financing to Nigeria. We've approved in excess of $140 million. But the biggest problem is some institutions cannot take up the funding because of the exposure to foreign exchange risk. So this has, I think, basically, let's say that has led us to work on raising a bond. We hope to issue the bond end of August, early September. Depending on which exchange rate you use, if you use the bank's rate, it's a different one. If you use the black market rate, which I know to be about 500, then it's a 500 billion naira bond, which we plan to launch. And I think essentially it's because we believe that no matter how many players you have on the market, the provision of financing for housing is always going to be there because it's a very capital intensive market. We've noted with interest the Sukuk bond from Family Homes Fund at, I think it's about 13% is a coupon rate, and we believe there's more that needs to be provided because to satisfy the shortage you need at least about 1 or 1.2, 1.3 trillion in dollar terms. Yes. I did scratch my nose. Okay. Anyway, I think this is just for information. Let's move. This is the urban growth housing delivery in Nigeria. I take it you all know about it because we are all Nigerians. Let's rather focus on maybe Shelter Afrique. There is a slide there that talks of Shelter Afrique. For those, I don't know, I could be tempted to be asking questions about Shelter Afrique, but maybe I could, yes, maybe I could. So Shelter Afrique, how many shareholders do you, you'd know this thing. You're too clever, my man, the group CEO. Okay, so yeah, anyway, how many shareholders do you think we have, sir? Yeah. Yeah, 44. That's why when I saw you, I realized when you're in class, when you know the most clever student, you don't want to get to them, you know. But yeah, so we have 44 countries, member states. We have, in addition, African Development Bank and Africa Reinsurance Corporation, which makes it 46. And then we have another DFI from the Francophone side called FSA that have just joined on board. So I think my brother Kim is looking at me and saying I've taken up my time, but maybe for those interested in our funding, excellent. I believe that this is probably what is key for those that are interested in Shelter Afrique funding, because what makes us unique is that we can provide funding in terms of longer terms, in terms of loans. When you talk of 10 years, more than the normal banking institutions, we can provide 10-year loans where you don't have to struggle. We provide 2-year grace periods. We like to provide funding to strong, counterparties. So you have the financing part, which is what we do. And if you're looking for funding, Elizabeth is here. She does most of the work. As somebody was telling me today, all I do is sign the contracts, which is true. I just sign. But Elizabeth, please stand up. Let's give her a round of applause. She's the one who called me up at an odd hour because there's 2 hours behind Nigeria. So, MD, people are raising local funding. What are we doing? And because of her, we decided let's raise the bond. Thank you, Elizabeth. And then, of course, we get into public-private partnerships. Why? Because if it's structured well, we're able to produce a product that is affordable. We as Shelter Afrique believe that it must be an end to the provision of houses for people that can't afford those houses. So we want to go down and produce houses which we believe between $10,000 to $30,000 is what we believe is low cost as Shelter Afrique. And we also provide the pre-advisory advisory services and project implementation. And then, of course, we have a Center of Excellence led by Dr. Gambo, which provides information to do with research, development on affordable housing. It's the one-stop shop. We also train developers to be able to build at large scale, which is capacity development. And then we also provide some sort of benchmark advocacy role for governments in terms of ideal housing policy, which led to the work we did at our AGM in Cameroon. I don't know if that worked because I keep now scratching my nose, but it's not moving, but it's okay. So some of the products we provide, I think Elizabeth is there. She can always provide you with more information on our products, but we want to be your strategic funding partner in your business. If it's innovation in housing, we're interested in that too. If it's project finance, we're interested in that. If it's lines of credit, we will provide the funding. We're very fortunate to hold our 40th AGM. I know many people attended here, but it was in Yaoundé, Cameroon on the 24th of June. We actually had support from the 44 finance ministers in Africa and also the 44 housing ministers, where the Yaoundé Declaration was formed. And I keep scratching again, but it's not working. Please change the slides. But just suffice to say that a consensus was reached that, there's a lot of talk about what we're going to do about housing, and we have a lot of conferences, but what we don't have is pragmatic action towards addressing the shortage of housing, which we, in our estimation as Shelter Afrique, is 56 million units in Africa, which we believe at an average of $25,000, that's about $3 trillion. So we want to play an active role, and we believe as African governments and institutions, we need to work in partnership to change the delivery of housing into an industrialized approach where we deliver houses through mass production. So the Yaoundé Declaration talks about mechanisms, commitments from different African governments. It also talks about the linkages between the Housing Finance Ministry and the Housing Ministry and the Finance Ministry to support the development of housing. In fact, we're fortunate to have our director who represents the Nigerian government, Director Olaten Komolafe, represent Nigeria on the board. So if you're not getting financing for housing, you need to look for him. Dr. Komolafe, please, I think I can see. Can you stand up so people can see you? Let's give him a round of applause. So please tag him. If there's an application that hasn't been approved, you ask him why not, because he sits on the board of Shelter Afrique. So in closing, I have to mention that we have a strategic partnership with IFC, where we've committed to build green homes, and also we've held some workshops online in terms of EDGE, which is the excellence in design for greater efficiencies. And then lastly, I think this is quite important. I know Hakim is looking at me and saying, don't you know time? I do, but I think this social housing tour could be beneficial to some institutions in Nigeria. So in terms of best practice, this tour in Morocco was held back because we then went into COVID and the borders were closed. Now we've engaged the Moroccan government. We're going to be setting up a Morocco social housing tour. If you want details for that as well, the tentative dates are the 31st of October and 5th of November. It's always important to look at what other people are doing in other areas, like Morocco. The next one we'll be working on is probably going to be Egypt. And then last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, which is really what our approach is, it says to revolutionize affordable housing in post-pandemic recovery. We are not experts in the market of Nigeria, but we want to work in partnerships. We do not provide end-user financing, but we provide wholesale funding. We provide funding to banks. We provide funding to established developers, likes of Mixta, and a few others that we will be looking at. So we believe the future is not in focusing on small projects, but large-scale projects in public-private partnerships that work, where every partner is bringing something to the table. We also believe there's a lot of opportunity through regional integration. If anything has taught us well with COVID is this thing of relying outside of Africa doesn't work. We believe in buy Nigeria, build Nigeria. Buy Africa, build Africa. Thank you very much. We'll also provide you with funding. I saw you clap. and then, of course, last but not least, adoption of technology. We believe the likes of even 3D printing. You've seen what we've like that. You've seen what has happened in Malawi, where they're actually using 3D printing, except the only challenge with 3D printing is you can't go 2 floors. So you're taking up lots of land, but the issue is you'll be able to build quicker. We also believe, of course, in adopting remote project management opportunities. And across the board, as I sit and speak to you today, we've entered into a partnership with the government of Cameroon to set up a factory there to build, to actually manufacture the houses and this just assemble. And we've got other countries also targeted. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to listen to our short presentation. It usually takes a long time, but we're under pressed with time. But I hope to meet some of you interested in funding from Shelter Afrique. Elizabeth is willing to talk to you. Director Komolafe is here as well, willing to talk to you. I thank you for your kind attention. And you notice I didn't talk about the housing shortage in Nigeria, what that figure is, because I respect Honorable Minister Fashola. If I tell you what the shortage is, I might be on my first flight to Kenya immediately. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. You know, I realized that Andrew flew 6 hours to get here for his presentation, you know, so that was why I gave some latitude. So now I'm going to prorate. You know, he flew 6 hours to make a 14-minute presentation. But if he drove 15 minutes, you know, so your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. I stand on the existing protocol. So, COVID-19 impact on global economy. Is presentation up? Okay, great. Thank you. So COVID-19 has had unprecedented impact on our global economy. Frontier economies like Nigeria have been severely hit with little buffer to mitigate the devastating effects. As developed countries look inwards to boost their economies, foreign direct investment has dropped considerably and driving down investment required for development in frontier economies like our country. Rising insecurity, devaluation of the naira, and high cost of production have also driven unemployment to its highest level in recent times. Unemployment rate is currently 33.3%, and underemployment is 22.8%. Inflation, unfortunately, it's getting close to 20% and is currently at 17.75%. These figures are very important because what they do is that they indicate, they show the problems we'll have in terms of demand, the demand side in the housing sector. So current challenges in the housing sector, so here I'm looking at not just the supply side, I'm also looking at the affordable home ownership and affordable, and the speakers before me have talked extensively on these issues. Nigeria currently has over 200 million population. 70% of that population is under 45 years old. And we anticipate or project that in 2050, Nigeria will have over 400 million. Very quickly. Rising construction costs, naira devaluation, most of our building materials are imported, and so of course the cost of production rises as well. Expensive financing, double-digit interest rates, rising unemployment rate also means that people have less finance to get on the house. Home ownership in Nigeria is approximately 10%, which is very low, and housing deficit currently at over 20 million, but the speakers here before me have said it's actually probably even as high as 70 million. So, failure to stem the growing deficit in the supply of affordable housing will have severe impact on the social and economic development of the country. Next slide. So housing market during the advent of COVID, what we saw a decline in access to global funding. We also saw construction companies either abandon their projects or slow down on building projects, especially during the lockdown. Disruption to delivery schedules. So when, during the lockdown, many construction companies abandoned sites and they had to come back. This had a huge impact on their cost as well, because despite COVID, many of them did not have moratorium and still had to pay interest on the financing they had taken. So we have increase in costs, funding and building costs, reduced demand in the sector as a result of the uncertainty around the time, and then also deficit in skilled labor force. You'll be surprised to know that some of the skilled labor that we have in the labor market, in the housing market, many of them actually come from neighboring African countries. So for example, if you want to do POP, etc., some of those people actually do come from Togo, unfortunately. It's a good thing, but I mean that in Nigeria we need to develop this skill set. So government intervention during this period. So we have, earlier on we talked about the Economic Sustainability Plan, which was initiated by the government, and this was to mitigate the decline in the economy and boost employment through the promotion of self-sufficiency and sustainability in the production and consumption of goods. It is estimated that this plan has created 774,000 jobs from public works program, construction and rehabilitation projects. Despite this initiative, unemployment is currently still at 33.3%. So obviously we need to do a lot more. So what are the financing options? So before we go there, let's talk about affordable housing, because there's been people really sort of talk about affordable housing, but we really have to define it very closely. So according to Habitat for Humanity, housing is considered affordable if the cost, mortgage or rent, is below 30% of housing income or household income. So access to quality affordable housing is fundamental to reducing poverty, improving the social economic landscape, and provide for sustainable development. Developing and frontier economies face severe deficits in affordable housing supply. public-private partnerships need to be in place to address this deficit. After, which really promotes regional integration and will actually help in terms of free movement of goods and services, may help reduce high building material and labor costs through economies of scale and efficient supply chain mechanisms. So I can see Kim's watching me. Okay, so financing in the housing sector includes public and private funding. And so I won't go through all of this. You all know about the Federal Mortgage Bank. The managing director is somewhere around. We also have the challenges they face in terms of providing loans. We have the commercial banks or the deposit money banks. We have all their issues here, high interest rates, collateral required, etc. We also have the family homes funds. They are here, well represented, and they have a stand outside. We also have the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company. We have private equity funds. Now, the challenge of private equity funds in terms of their financing is that they rarely invest in affordable housing because they target very high ROIs, and they usually have very restrictive conditions for investing. So we have pension funds. We had a session, we had an event a few months ago where we talked about the role of pension funds in the real estate sector. And we talked about rates and some of the very, very important instruments in the market. And some of the challenges for the PFAs came up, and the regulators were there, and I believe that they've listened and probably go back and try and address these issues. So they're all here if you want to have a look at them. Challenges for the PFAs are here. So now I want to talk very quickly about the UK housing market. The reason why I want to do that is that government stepped in and helped improve support in for the demand side of that sector. So in the UK, they have, if you're a first-time buyer, you have a mortgage guarantee scheme, which helps you get onto the housing ladder. They have the help to buy option. The details are all here. So you have something called the shared ownership schemes, where people come together and own a property. You have the first home scheme. You have the right to buy, and you also have tax, stamp duty waivers and deferred payments. And this was very important during the COVID times because many of them lost their jobs, or some of them were earning a lot less. And to stimulate the housing market, the UK government decided to eliminate, for a period, stamp duty for first-time buyers, and for other buyers, other options in the UK, which makes the UK market, I'm sure you heard that the UK housing market is one of the most vibrant in the world, and that's because home occupier mortgages. You have the single-digit financing for development companies. This is on the supply side. You have project financing available at affordable rates. And you also have big institutions called the property investment companies, or what we call the specialist property funds. Now, these are very important, and that's something I believe that Nigeria can replicate. So you have in these companies funds pulled together from pension funds, insurance companies, and family offices. Family offices being very wealthy people who have their own investment companies in-house. And these monies are pulled together and invested in the real estate sector. Alternative financing in the housing sector in Nigeria. So Nigerian developers, we have some of them here. So what they do, there's a lot of challenge in terms of being able to find financing because you really have to bridge the gap between the developer's exit and the investor's entry. And to do that, you need money, and raising that money can be a challenge. And so, so what happens? So what happens is that the developers have thought about other ways of raising financing. I know a particular development company that has set up a mutual fund, and they have a fund manager. And so what they've done is that mutual fund helps raise money for the development. They've actually done that successfully, and I think they've raised nearly $1 billion so far. So theirs is a Sharia corporate bonds. You have Sharia funding, borrowing from banks like Jay's Bank. You have off-plan sales. You have companies trying to reconfigure capital structure. You also have technology-backed funding schemes, and then you also have the big cooperatives. So sometimes developers go to cooperatives and say, will you be an off-taker? And on the back of that, they get financing at a much cheaper rate. Solutions to resolve. So we have the public-private partnerships. We all talked about this throughout our session. Establishing and implementing monetary and fiscal policies to stimulate rapid economic recovery, and this is for the government to do. Lower interest rates for developers and purchasers. Easier access to construction funding on less restrictive terms. So, for example, a housing fund targeted at developers will help bridge the liquidity gap. Encourage locally. I know that there's a particular company that manufactures sanitary ware. We also know that we also produce tiles, marble, etc. Increasing earnings of salaried workers in the public sector and getting people, young people, on the housing ladder earlier. Now, this is very important. In the UK, they've really been able to do this. But in Nigeria, it's unfortunate. You don't see a 25-year-old working in the public sector owning a home. We need to get people on the housing ladder as early as possible. And we also need people to earn more to be able to afford housing. We need technical colleges to boost supply of skilled and semi-skilled labor force. And we need to improve remortgaging processes and options. Now, this is very important because in the UK, you can remortgage your house and use the money to get another home. So we need to have the system in place to encourage us to be able to, buy multiple homes as well, not just one. PMI should move from NHF structure to providing liquidity to primary lenders and promotion of a secondary market, because another challenge for lenders is there isn't really a secondary market to offload mortgage-backed assets. Better certification processes and building codes for structural quality and delivery times. Some developers don't deliver on time, so we need to have a better process for sanctioning developers who fail to deliver on time. But many times developers also suffer issues relating to inefficiencies in our system. The central bank can provide liquidity for deposit money banks through swapping of mortgage assets with treasury bills. This makes them more comfortable to lend. Reduce statutory costs for land transactions. Some of the previous speakers talked about this. Tax waivers or incentives for developers of affordable housing, and establishing property investment companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ify, for listening to my music as I was playing it. Let's put our hands together once again for Ify. I mean, that's what happens when you've spent months to prepare these presentations and you have to compress everything and deliver in a few minutes. Can be a bit challenging, But thank you. We're going to come back to some of those points. We're just going to ask my two panelists just to make their own contributions. First, I will start with Ogo Ifeoma Akabogo, State Manager FCT for BOI. She's not making a formal presentation. Issues which have been raised in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Who are we? We are Bank of Industry. We are a development financial institution. However, we do not deliver financing directly to suppliers. However, we do that indirectly. So who do we finance? I'm not going to talk about housing. The experts have spoken. So what do you want to hear that Bank of Industry can offer post-pandemic and within pandemic? Our first reaction is that for those whom we finance that are contributors to the housing sector development, by which I mean the input providers, anybody, any producer, manufacturer, outside those providing the land and maybe technical and professional services to the housing sector is my customer. The wood processing, PVC pipes and the rest of it, the windows, the glass, anything manufactured that could be used in the housing sector is my customer. If they are here, please visit us and we'll see how we can collaborate with you. A lot of talk was made concerning the suppliers and the micro. Of course, that is my platform. We use the micro enterprises, the small and medium enterprises, and the large enterprises platform to deliver financing to suppliers of housing inputs. So feel free to communicate. Government has intervention platforms through which they give priority to housing sector. We know how important it is to strengthen local development. Andrew spoke about Buy Nigeria. That is what we do to make sure that all inputs you require, all your raw materials to develop any structure in Nigeria, you can afford to source them locally. And because our financing is cheap, one of the major features of BOI financing is that our interest rate comparatively is lower than most interest rates out there. We give interest rates 10% per annum. Some you can get at lower interest rate of about 8-9%. Some intervention funds that we also manage can come as low as 5% per annum, sometimes even lower. So what are you waiting for? You need to talk to us. We also stimulate household effective demand. When that small block molding company next door to you is able to avoid the equipment they need to produce good and durable block, they are able to generate income, generate wealth, even employment for those who ordinarily would have been idle around you and constitute social problem for your community. We finance them 2 million, 3 million naira, and they are able to stand on their own and they are not beggarly anymore. BOI specifically is willing, able, and ready. I must mention that we play in so many other sectors, but since we are talking housing today, I have to limit my talk to that. What are the other strategies we are looking at? I've talked about interest rates, our innovative financing solutions, our MSME focus, basically to address the retail suppliers. It has to be sustainable. We talk about job creations. I've just alluded to that. Our women and youth, we have a lot of programs we developed. What I will ask is that, rising from this, how do we galvanize all the stakeholders who may be able to qualify for financing to come together? I don't have the time to tell you how we go about financing people, but BOI will be available. My office is just a stone throw from here. I could have walked down to this place from here in central area. BOI house just behind Unity Bank. Feel free if you're in Abuja. If you're not in Abuja, we are in almost all the states and we have regional offices covering the 6 geopolitical zones. If you're in Lagos, better still, that's where our headquarters is, so that you can access more information. I don't mind if you organize. We can come speak to people so they understand how we do this. Let me quickly talk about our interventions in terms of Naira and Kobo so far, not just in the housing sector, generally speaking. Between 2015 and 2020, I can tell you, in the micro MSME sector, we have invested over 229 billion naira. And in the large enterprises, we have done over 740 billion. And then we have a total of about almost 1 trillion naira invested in this economy. we do not just relax. We have the capacity to take this, because within this COVID period, BOI was able to mobilize €1 billion and $1 billion to be able to finance businesses within Nigeria. Isn't that amazing? That they can trust Nigerian institution, public institution, to be able to do this. I'm talking about international financing led by the Afrexim Bank. And we have other strategic partners that we work with that will be able to deliver to you. I'm going to stop here because it gave me 2 minutes. I don't want to take too much of your time.
Thank you very
Thank you
very much, Ogo, for stopping on the dot of 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're going to take our last panelist, certainly not the least, Chris Okemo, to speak to the issues which have been raised. He's representing the acting director of FSS 2020.
Yeah, I greet all of you on the existing protocol. I stand. I'm here to represent Ayu Hassan, the acting director of FSS 2020. And for those who do not know, it's an initiative of Central Bank of Nigeria, and it's in collaboration with our most key regulatory institutions, SEC, NICOM, PENCOM, DMO, NDIC, and some other regulatory institutions. And what we do is that we keep on reshaping the financial landscape, identify key strategic areas we think we can indeed help to improve the financial system and make it better. When we started in 2006, when Soludo initiated it as the governor of Central Bank, we were 47 in the ladder, and we said that we are going to see how we can indeed upscale Nigeria financial system to maybe to become one of the top 20 economies by the year 2020. Incidentally, 2020 come and gone, we are 27th, and so we are trying to meet the Committee of Governors with a view to extending it, just like to be in alignment with the Million-Ton National Development Plan and equally the economic blueprint of the federal government to 2050 or 2030. And I think it is approved because some initiatives from the 774 which we identified when we began, we try to dovetail them and get the priority right and get the ones which we can do. So for now, let me say this in terms of our activities during the COVID. Like she said, the last speaker, it was a problem because even tenants too were evicted forcefully because there was seemingly lull in the economy because of the COVID. What we did was to see how we could indeed support through because the primary mortgage institutions are being regulated by the central bank, while the NMRC handles the issue of the secondary market. And NMRC, Central Bank of Nigeria, equally has a share there, I think over 40% or 50% of the share there. So we keep on working together, collaborating and see how we could help the PMIs, the primary mortgage institutions and the secondary markets. Now, and we are still doing that. Now, what is happening now is that we want to do what is called the Mortgage Guaranteeing Company, which has been approved. And last week, when the Mortgage Bankers Association of Nigeria met in Lagos, what was in the burner was how do we indeed ensure its immediate commencement, because it was envisaged that it was going to take off in middle of June this year. And then the essence is to see how we could cushion some mortgage underwritings and then ensure that equally we bring in some more players to be able to access funds access funds with some moratorium, that is to be able to pay before the lapse of the tenure that's created for the mortgage. And I think it is going to happen. We are still working towards that, and I'm sure in the next few weeks or so it will take off. We begin to see what we can do about it. And then at the same time too, we agree that there is need now for Nigeria to look inwards. All this idea of using cement and mortars, we have to stop it and find a way we can use our toppers or something like our sands here to see how I can use compressed sands to build these things so they can be environmental friendly. That is in turn with the sustainability principles of the green initiative of the bank, and then maybe find a way we can equally ensure that we establish the green smart city. There are some other things we're doing. We try to liaise with the governors forum and see how we can facilitate the passage of the mortgage model foreclosure law, which indeed is intended to reduce the grant access to finance and ensure that the problem associated with the Land Use Act is palliated or reduced minimally, so that states can adopt that using the board of the mortgage or listening to be able to do all these things. And what we envisage is that there is need for really the housing gap, which is dangled between 17 and 20 million, and I'm sure it's even more than that. The lady who presented first paper was saying that in UK 25% government worker can own a house. In Nigeria, some people who are 25 are still youth corpers. Not even youth corpers, even those who are 25 cannot do that here. In Abuja here, the cheapest land you can get here may be around Gwagwalada 3 million or 3.5. And then you'll find out that even to get it as a civil servant is equally a challenge. So all these are reckoned. What we are trying to do is how we can ensure that these things are brought down. The the commercial banks, if they can be lending as single obligor, that is bring the interest rate very low, and then those who indeed take such loans be able to, pay within the period of time when they had access to that without foreclosure. That is going to court and equally taking this property by way of litigation, which is equally discouraging. So all we are saying is that it's a team thing. We shall continue to collaborate.
The story around
and then ensure that we can ensure that we do everything humanly possible so that everybody should have access to finance, have their own home, have their own house. And then Nigeria will begin to better for that, because if you have your own home, it's going to catalyze the economy. It's going to even save a lot of, even the crime rates will reduce. So I wish you well, and I thank the lawyer who is organizing this. That is the Abuja International Housing Show. We shall continue to be part of it, and we shall continue to support you anyhow you want it, whether financially or otherwise, so that we shall keep on continue to collaborate with the people to ensure that this thing is done. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Definitely our time is fast spent. So I'm just going to ask if you can just take one or two questions of comments from the floor just before we round up. Is there any comment? One. Can I get a second comment from the floor? Okay, we'll just take this one comment and we'll just... can we just give a mic to the gentleman in white?
All protocols observed. My name is Mark Hiroki. I work for City Code Mortgage Bank. I'm happy that we have this beautiful program, and we have people who are moving great things in the housing sector internationally. My question goes to Shelter Africa and BOI. BOI first, I start with you. As a mortgage bank, I want to know how many mortgage banks you are partnered with and what product do you have for mortgage bank. I'm here as a mortgage banker, and that is where I'm interested in. For Shelter Africa, I know you're a very big giant in the industry. You've been doing well in Kenya and other places. We want to know what product you have for mortgage bankers in Nigeria. There is a product that is being developed. I know Federal Mortgage Bank has gone so far on it. The Aspera product. One of the points that has always been a disturbing point is how do we control the risk involved? We have a lot of Nigerians abroad who want to have a house here. So we've been trying to have a central profiling system whereby the risk that the risk profile we have abroad can also be utilized here. And where the default here, it will also appear in their product, in their records over there. Where do you come in? How can you help us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll just take a quick response to that question from BOI and from Shetapri, and then we'll close the session.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, we only deal with microfinance institutions. We do on-lending with them. I think Federal Mortgage Bank is like a sister agency in development financing, so they are the ones that will handle mortgage institutions. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you very much. So I think Shelter Afrique are more than willing and able to fund mortgage banks. In some places they call them PMLs, primary mortgage lending institutions. We have funded Wema Bank. I think, Elizabeth, we paid them, I think, about $9 million just maybe a couple of weeks ago. The other one, I think, was Prime Mortgage Bank. But having said that, maybe instead of trying to find out who else is getting money, you need to find Elizabeth and submit your application. And if your balance sheet is strong, I can commit to you that you will get Shelter Afrique money. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Short and sharp. Unfortunately, we have to bring this session to a close. I mean, our time is fast spent, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening patiently. But I want to especially thank all the speakers and panelists, particularly Maria, who is very, very passionate. Very passionate. I mean, she's still been waiting. She's been waiting since. Maria was very passionate about housing finance in Africa, especially. And Kesha, I know that why not for COVID-19, Kesha will have been with us here. We always sit on this platform together. So can you just please join me to appreciate Maria and Kesha especially. Thank you, Kesha, thank you, Maria. I also like to thank our panelists here, Ife, Andrew, Barrister Oko, and of course, Ogo. Thank you so much for your presentations. I also thank myself for being a very good chairman of this session. The conversation continues. What is very clear, I mean, from what we've heard in the last hour or so, is that a lot of outside of the box thinking is required. You know, we cannot continue to do things the same way we have always done it. I've always said that for us to move this industry forward, particularly in Nigeria, two things must happen. We must commoditize housing. We have to create a system that enables us to buy houses pretty much the same way we buy every other thing. That increases the absorption capacity, and it makes the market a lot more vibrant. The other thing, of course, is that we have to start manufacturing houses. We're still building houses. You know, we're still calling Baba Sharafa, Baba Toib, you know, to come and build houses. We have to industrialize the process and deliver houses to scale. You know, it's only then that we can really move the cheese in this industry. And of course, we need all this innovative. I mean, one of the sweetest music to my ear is the fact that Andrew and Shelter Afrique are now thinking of a local bond. People always underestimate the depth of this market. You know, I've been in the market like 5 or 6 times in my previous life. I've used various instruments, and I know that this market is a very, very deep market. And I think with the likes of Shelter Afrique coming in to raise 500 billion naira, that will really show all of us, you know. And we're on the queue to help him to utilize the fund very well in this market, you know. So I'd like to thank all of you, and I want to thank you for your patience in listening. Thank you, and God bless.
Okay, let's quickly have a group photograph. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for that wonderful session. we are moving to the next session right now, and we are going to be looking at housing finance in post-COVID era, products, innovations, and options. And to moderate this session, we have the former Vice President of AFDB, Dr. B.C. Ogunjobi. He's going to be the chairman of this session. Please, we'd like to invite you to come. So look at this issue this afternoon. We have Abdul Malik Mahdi is the CEO of Mother Shelter Limited. Please join us here. You can come here. Let's put our hands together for him. Let's put our hands together for the chairman as he joins us here. We also have Mr. Tairu Machido, CEO 117 Capital. Tairu Machido, please join us. I don't know, Mr. Patrick Domingo Tembwa, is he here? Mr. Patrick Domingo Tembwa. Okay. Yep. Mr. Patrick Domingo is not here physically, but he's going to join us online. He's going to do his presentation. Okay. I think that's him on the screen. I think you can see him there. Let's put our hands together for him. We also have Mr. Bashir Oshodi, the CEO of Trust Bank Auto Limited. He's also one of our presenters here. Let's put our hands together for him as well. Mr. Korede Adedayo, Korede First Trust Mortgage Bank Limited. Well,